I know for a fact most of you do not normally have that emotion when it comes to CSS. Hi everyone, thanks for coming to this talk. Type-safe style systems, the future of CSS. I'm Josh Goldberg. You can find me on all sorts of things as Joshua K. Goldberg, including Twitter, Blue Sky, my Mastodon server is Mastodon, and .com. That's at the bottom of the slides. Oh, it was working! Oh no! The clicker. Because there's not enough applause! Yeah! That actually worked! Thank you. Yeah, I work full-time not in CSS, but on general dev tooling. So if you want to talk about static analysis and linting and TypeScript and all that, happy to chat. I also wrote a book. Just curious, who here has read Learning TypeScript? 1, 2, okay, 7, thank you. Great stuff. The reason why I do linting and TypeScript and all that is because I care very deeply about the act of development. When software developers have good tools, they are faster, they're more efficient, the software is better, much better, and they're able to really push forward the industry. They're able to innovate in the tooling space, allowing other people to be more effective and productive. And I think that's awesome. So today I want to give you a very, very gross oversimplification of all this stuff that's been happening in the type-safe styling space, which is a phrase that sounds very niche, and is kind of niche right now, but I think is going to get more and more popular over time. Now, there's all sorts of stuff that's come out over the years, like jQuery UI and Reach UI, and to read all these things, Foundation. And I'm not going to cover most of the CSS or styling tools that are out there, because we don't have 7 hours of continuous talking. I'm just going to give you a narrative that I hope will help explain where we came from with styles, the current state of the industry, things like Tailwind, and where I hope and think we're going next. Things that will make it easier to develop big, complex, dynamic front-end applications with as few annoying CSS specificity battles as possible. Does that sound good and exciting to everyone? Yes! Awesome. Now before Foundation and Bootstrap and all that Tailwind stuff, there was HTML. HTML was good. It was simple. It was plain. This is HTML. Look at that. There could not be a more beautiful, clean way of representing a heading 1 with the text "Hello World" in the world. Maybe heading 1 or something like that would be a better tag. Who knows? But this is simple and beautiful, and it's plain, but it works. When HTML first came out, it was not styled. This is what that looked like. That's what you got. And in fact, a lot of the early proponents of HTML were excited about how it did not come with styling. Because your custom HTML reader, later referred to as a browser, could render things how it wanted. If you wanted to customize this page to have a tan background and center text in papyrus font, you maniac, you could do that. But unfortunately, we figured out that web pages need styling, hence CSS. Woo! Yeah! So now, because we needed to be able to have on-brand websites and interactive stuff coming later, you would be able to do something like this. Now, there are inline styles. Again, this talk is an oversimplification. But look, if you wanted a fancy H1, you could give it color purple, background, some text, padding, text line, and that allowed you to make this! Wow! So good, yes! Now, this is not particularly strong programming. This is early CSS. And if anyone here remembers the early days of CSS, there was a lot of hullabaloo, and by early days I mean basically the entire history of CSS, hullabaloo about how annoying and bad it is to write CSS. If you just look up, you get so many memes for bad CSS. This one's my favorite one, the Peter Griffin with the shades. So CSS was hard. At the beginning of any new technology, it's hard to write because it's new, it's untested. So we added things like frameworks. And a really popular framework that people don't really talk about anymore, but I remember being the thing. Does anyone here remember Bootstrap? Show of hands. Woo! Wow, a lot of people remember Bootstrap. That makes me really happy. Because there was a time when every website looked like this. Remember those buttons? Remember that green outline? Bring back Bootstrap, yes! No. But this was great. Like you got like container fluid as a class, and then sidebar buttons follow. Interestingly, some of these ideas are actually going to keep showing up over and over again later in styling. The idea that you might have like a semantic variant, like a way to refer to like, I don't know, alert message success. That's really readable. That's actually really good dev ergonomics, even though the output looks like every site from the same time. Another really interesting thing happening back in the day was preprocessors. Does anyone here remember writing less? L-E-S-S? Yeah, not to be confused with SCSS, which is sassy CSS. But before CSS had variables or a lot of the other new modern features, you had to use a preprocessor, something that looks like that and then compiles to just CSS. Now, fun fact about the evolution of this, CSS was its own thing, and then we came out with Sass, syntactically awesome style sheets, which had a syntax a lot like Python. Everyone hated that, so then we moved to another thing called Less, which had a more CSS-like syntax with curlies. And then we had SCSS, which is sassy CSS, which is all the best features of both of them. That's convoluted, we're not going to go back into that, but I think there's a really interesting parallel that JavaScript went through the same thing. JavaScript then got supplemented-ish by CoffeeScript. And remember CoffeeScript? Woo, yeah! I never used it, hated it. But it brought a lot of really nice things that later got added to the language. So then CoffeeScript basically became unnecessary, but you have things like Babel or SWC later on, and TypeScript that add other stuff that couldn't be easily added to JavaScript. But thank God we don't need most of that anymore because of CSS3. And it's really funny to me that I say CSS3 now, and I get like none of the cheers and excitement from like Bootstrap. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you said CSS3, the room was on fire. You could do things like centering a div. Who here centered a div before CSS3? Oh, vertical align middle, display table. Awful. Now, in like 3 lines of CSS, with the 4th for the, or I guess 5th and 6th for the container, you can do this. You can center. And as silly as it is to get all excited about centering, because people used to Peter Griffin meme about that all the time, I think this also happens to coincide nicely with a really common pattern in software development. We have some kind of primitive thing, let's say CSS, and we have the, let's say the right part of this cycle, common difficulties, reusing color constants, which I'll later refer to as tokens, centering a div. We'll figure out these common difficulties. We'll make a whole bunch of different competing solutions like Foundation and Bootstrap and Less and Sass. And then we'll figure out the right way to do these things, to build it into the platform or language. And we'll make better primitives, CSS3 continuously doing that. And then we'll find new difficulties. And that's really beautiful, I think, because it means that we get much better foundational, much better primitive stuff to work with as developers. So like now, you can use CSS variables, which I think is really cool. And as a result, because this takes over a lot of what SCSS does, you probably don't need SCSS anymore. Just curious, who here still uses SCSS? A few hands. Okay. I can't tell you if you're wrong. You might be right. Or it might just be that your code has been using it for 5 years, and that's fine. That's how it is. But most of what it does has been supplemented or supplanted by CSS. So that's one era that I want to think about it as a unit of us making CSS better. But this talk isn't really about CSS. It's about the things that generate CSS. Because all the foundational stuff in CSS works great on its own if you have a simple website, one with just a few pages. But when we get to really, really complex, dynamic things like JavaScript front ends, oh my gosh, the websites get so much more complicated. And you really need something to manage that complexity at scale. The phrase at scale, I realize, is very like enterprise sounding, but it's really true. And we've been iterating on this as a whole other section for ages. I'm so sorry if your favorite framework isn't on here. But we just keep getting more and more complex stuff to write more and more big apps. And in order to manage that complexity, a really common approach nowadays still is CSS modules. Curiosity, who here has imported star as styles from /styles.module.css? Live coding right there. Yeah, so like this is a SCSS file, but we can now have dynamic CSS linked directly to our stuff, our JavaScript, or whatever this is, Preact. And because it's used as variables, you might be able to do something like, okay, if we are clicked, which is maybe some piece of state, then we'll add a styles not pressed to our button. And that just works. It's amazing. So CSS modules was one of the really big things that allowed us to write really complex apps with JavaScript and CSS together. And it was nice. But I need more. There's always better that we could be doing. What if I wanted to be really complex in my styles? What if I want basically JavaScript? What if I wanted to basically be writing my CSS in JavaScript? So people came out with things like styled components. Shout out also Motion. Where in your JS file, you could write style.div, some template literal garbage that happens to be CSS. And that works. Now your container is a component that has those styles. Now I personally detest this. I can't stand this syntax. But please don't clap. I don't want to go viral for pooping on style components. This is really nice. There are a lot of reasons and ways why this is better than stuff that came before, and I now don't like it because we have new things that got better over time. But when this was introduced, oh my gosh, that was so nice. Really beautiful. Having everything in just the one file, if you wanted, oh, so nice. All right. This syntax, by the way, has tripped up a lot of new developers, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we don't really do this much anymore. But you could put a function inside your template literal string. That's valid, that works. So like a $pressed prop on the button component can change it from, say, one color to another, which you could also store as variables. So that's pretty cool. But this isn't great for styling at scale. I want to explain that a little bit. Because once we figured out how to build complex websites, we then started the slow process of learning how to build good-looking complex websites. Very different things. For example, JSHeroes. This is a beautiful webpage. Look at this. It's got this awesome ECMA mascot. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. We have, it's like a clickable link. There's like a button thing. We have, yay! We have like modals and stuff which use the same colors as the things around it. People actually have a lot of needs for styling. It's no longer just write a few components. It's I need an entire design system. I need a standardized button. I need a modal. I need a header. And I think there are four main needs, four styling needs that developers have been congealing around, figuring out they need for their styling systems. They need to be convenient. They need it to be something that is not a total pain in the butt to write. And if you miss a curly bracket, the entire file is read squiggly. They need to be assistable. If I want to start typing BL, I want to be autocompleted to blue, or whatever my equivalent is. I want it to be refactorable. But if I change my primary color from blue to green, I should be able to like right-click and rename or do some automation. I don't want to have to manually go with every single .css file. And I want it to be themable. Light mode, dark mode, high contrast mode, all these different modes need to be seamlessly swappable at runtime. Because we all can't agree on whether to use light mode or dark mode because sometimes you need one or the other. Now there is one need missing here. Performance, which I think we should care about, but it's kind of difficult to put up there because a lot of sites are not performant. But performance would be nice. Performance is a good goal too. And for style components, matching cart or cart P, I don't think so. This is not great readability. It makes sense, but I think we can do better. And actually, I should note that this isn't the only thing that was being iterated on at the time. One of the many other attempts at really CSS and JS that I really like was, I don't even remember Glamour. Glamour was great. This is another idea of how to do CSS and JS, where you define your CSS as variables with like objects. So you could do like CSS align center, and then use those generated class names as variables, which I think is really cute. I honestly really liked Glamour. It's also really friendly for type safety because you're writing JavaScript, not pure template literals. Means that it's a little easier to do dynamic stuff. It's quote unquote just a function, so your button styles can take in a rest prompt. I really like this. Fun fact, it's actually made by someone named Single Pie who now works on PartyKit, and it hasn't been worked on in years, but I'm the smarter. That being said, I'm about to go onto a section that might induce some emotions. That's not a pun of the CSS library emotion. I want to be very clear here that this is a positive, enriching environment. I don't want to hear any boos or shouts or fistfights in the back, because I really like the following thing. I actually think it's fantastic. Tailwind. Woo! Yes, and I'm not ending with Tailwind. There's more after. Don't worry. This is what Tailwind looks like. This is like a common usage of Tailwind. Now I gave the whole emotional caveat because this makes people really mad on the internet. If you haven't experienced Tailwind discussions on Twitter, this is very different from what we were doing before. It's not CSS. It's a bunch of class names that happen to match to the equivalent CSS-ish based on their name. Flex is display flex. BG blue 50 becomes background the blue 500 value, whatever hex that is. I think this is simultaneously beautiful and hideous. It's beautiful because it's right there. It's so easy. There's nothing easier than writing Tailwind styles. We just want to throw some stuff together on the page or reuse the styles from another part of your app. I also don't like it because it's not type safe, and I'll get into that more later. But one of the big things that I think Tailwind does really well is it expresses CSS values in terms of tokens. From the atomic design perspective, if you use that, like your atoms or foundational tokens. What that is I want to be able to say not hex, CC, DD, FF. I want to say backlight or alert for my color. If you're always writing your styles with hexes, it becomes so hard and so difficult to update to retheme over time. Instead of writing RGBA, whatever, it would be nice to store it as a variable or a constant. Things like font sizes or spacing. One thing that Tailwind does really well is it allows you to specifically take these, and if you want, you can use the built-in tokens, or you can even swap in your own with a little bit of custom Tailwind config. That's awesome. We're now expressing our designs in Codeland in terms of the tokens that they were designed with, rather than some specific implementation detail, hex values, or RGBA values. I love that. It also has like hover and responsiveness or other media queries or interaction states built in, which is really cool. And it's got, well, it's all strings, so if you want to be dynamic, if you want to, say, have a different order based on whether you're pressed, you could concatenate your strings manually. I know there are like Tailwind extensions, ways of doing this, but this works. I don't like it, but it works. The Tailwind docs, by the way, are fantastic. I just want to shout out incredible documentation. One of the big reasons why so many people love Tailwind. So is Tailwind cart or cart P? I think it is. I think it's pretty good. It's a pretty good system. It's a little weird messing with strings, but at the end of the day, it gets the job done. It expresses things in terms of tokens. It's so easy to write. It's really nice. And there's a reason why a lot of people use Tailwind. But the string thing, I just keep hanging up. Because this is valid Tailwind. This is totally fine. This does not give any type errors. And I hate this. You should never be able to make a typo in your code. Tooling should never allow you to typo. It should at least give you a warning of, hey, did you mean that? So people are still innovating in the CSS in the styling space. And what I'm really excited about for my last 10 minutes is to talk about component libraries and styling systems. This is another new age way of doing things. Anyone here use Chakra or MUI or any equivalent? Similar to how Tailwind allows you to have inline declared styles with the class strings, these allow you to do what's called a box component, where instead of having class equals quote flex, you could just say flex on the component. That's awesome. This means that we're combining the writing it just right there, not in some other file of Tailwind, with the type safety of not having to use manual strings. And if you want to, let's say, have, responsive styles or hover, you can do that too. It's just JavaScript objects.
If you want to have it, different based on your pressed state or whatnot, you can. And what's also, I think, interesting is there are a lot of parallels between your Tailwind configuration and configuration for libraries for foundational systems like Chakra. And I'm showing this because I want to be clear. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, or that one does things the other doesn't. These are just two different ways of writing your styling systems. And yeah, being able to represent things in terms of, let's say, your brand colors for your background, really, really nice. Now, I mentioned earlier I want type safety. And there is some good type safety in Chakra and a lot of these libraries. What you're seeing now is actually a really cool TypeScript tip, where in TypeScript you can represent a union, meaning this is allowed to be one of several possible values or types. Here we're saying that color props are allowed to be either red or orange or any string and also the empty object, which means any string, but also give me autocompletion. That's what this does. My color prop, if you start writing it out, it's allowed to be orange or red. And unfortunately, that means that it's not type safe. So that's unfortunate, because this is allowed again. This is totally fine in TypeScript land. Yay. Now, they are working on it. There's actually a feature that was added a year or two ago to Chakra, there we go, called strict token types, which I'm really excited about. Shout out Chakra team, y'all are doing great work. It's not on the public doc site, last I checked, so it's coming. But one of the reasons why a lot of these libraries like Chakra are having a hard time getting where we want to be with type safety is because they're huge. Chakra UI is actually a component library that happens to expose a style system. It comes with things like button and heading. And to visualize, Bootstrap back in the day did that too. It was the style system and some components. Tailwind is just the style system, whereas Chakra UI also adds in even more components on top. Now, Tailwind does have a Tailwind UI. That's a separate thing that they make that's a component library, and it's fantastic. But I think where the really exciting innovation is for this space is at the very bottom, the styling system for Chakra. Style systems. I have 7 minutes and 40 seconds left, and that's the actual stuff we're talking about. We finally made it, people. Yes! Woo! Style systems. Almost there. Vanilla extract. Has anyone here used VE? Vanilla extract? I see 3 hands. Okay, great. Actually, a few people. This is so cool. Imagine if you could create a theme that exposed a class to put in your page and then CSS variables, where you could say all your token values, your colors, your spaces, your whatevers. And then imagine if you wrote that same glamour style object referring to vars.color.whatever, and then could use that in your code. Now, I will say this does need to be in a separate .css.ts or .js file, but hey, styles.container, this kind of looks like CSS modules. And then what if the framework on the inside built it so that container equals and h1 equals and stuff became actual CSS class names in your page, whether it's built or being dynamically generated at runtime? That's so cool. This is such a cool idea. Because it's all JavaScript in the developer land, the CSS file, which means that if you try to do like vars.color.wat, you actually get a type error, finally, yes, dear God. So I love that. And it has that like type-safe object style that I really like. This is really convenient. This is a treat. I really like vanilla extract. And it's a really cool way to think of just the style system. It doesn't add in a button or a heading or the bootstrap modals or whatever. It just adds the style system. But I want more. I always want more. I want it to be in the same file, because I personally think, this is a moderately hot take maybe, that the most convenient component styles are like Tailwind style or Chakra style, where they're inline. So imagine if you wrote a wrapper around vanilla extract called Rainbow Sprinkles. Their entire ecosystem is cake and cupcake themed. It's fantastic. That allowed you to have that same kind of a box component with the same kind of dynamicism, where you can interact with variables, you can have like responsive objects, like background, base, one thing, medium, viewpoint, another. Now, we've seen more and more configuration as we go on, so I'm just going to skim over this. If you create a Rainbow Sprinkles object specifying which of your props are the built-in CSS ones or your own variables, and then create a box component that applies a class name and has children and other props and stuff. You can then do it in rainbow thingy, sprinkles, yay! Yeah, this stuff is really new, and that doesn't yet give a type error. I'm dying on the inside here. These systems are coming. They're very exciting. I'm really hopeful for them, but they're in progress, and I hopefully soon will be able to use them in production. Very exciting stuff. So in closing, I want to go over a few thoughts, and each of these slides is going to be the quick memeable one if you want. God dang it. There we go. Nope. Okay. So I think this is where we are now, which is we're working on the next stage of styling systems, things like rainbow sprinkles on top of vanilla extract. And I hope next will be really nice component libraries built on top of them, making it even easier to use this token-based stuff. I think this is a really good second example of the cycle of we figure out the problems, we try a bunch of different solutions, we find what we like, and we build it into the foundational layer. There are a lot of in-progress ones, and I'm so sorry if you use or work on one that I didn't mention. One of these is a Pokemon. Next slide. But let's end with, I have a few opinions. It's a talk on styling, so I will give you my hot takes. And I would love to talk to you or with you about these at the end. For starters, almost always it is better to use a design system. Sometimes you just want to throw some crap together, that's fine. But if you're working with multiple people, have a long-lived project, I highly recommend, at the very least, split out your tokens. Things like your colors, your really common paddings, or maximum widths. And then if you can use something like atomic design, highly recommend. It's up to you. Design systems are nice. Each of these things that we looked at, even raw CSS, has some strengths, and they also have weaknesses compared to each other. I don't want to hear anyone come away from this saying, wow, Tailwind really sucks. No, Tailwind is awesome. It's just, pros and cons. And everything is a reaction to what came before. All these things are iterations on stuff that was worse beforehand and is now better. So in 10 years, it'll be okay to say Tailwind sucks, because in 10 years, we'll have something exponentially better, probably written by the Tailwind team. Which brings up another point. If you don't know something to be true, please don't amplify it. I put this in because the first time I gave a talk on CSS, people had bad hot takes coming out of it attributed to me. Please don't do that. But know is actually a really difficult thing, because knowing is not the same thing as believing for any philosophy majors in the room. So if you haven't put in a good faith effort to validate an opinion, I recommend not amplifying it. Thanks. I feel very weird lecturing up here, but really, I don't like any of these. These are bad. These are objectively bad opinions in the current year. But nicer opinions are things like, I prefer X over Y for reasons. Like, this situation is what I need. Cool. I hear jokes being uttered. A few resources that are really nice. Vanilla Extract and Rainbow Sprinkles are open source. Rainbow Sprinkles is not production ready, but it's a really cool exploration. I think Wayfair has been using it in production, but it's fine. Someone from that team can go yell at me about misinformation later. I have every code snippet you saw in the slides is on my GitHub repo, TypeSafe style systems. So if you want to try them out, play around, there are a few little niceties in there. And then, is Andre anywhere? There he is. There's a great blog post from 2022 about the evolution of scalable CSS. How long did you say you spent writing this post? A year? 1 year on this. Read the blog post. My God. It's a really good overview of a lot of the details that I glossed over here. Anyway, as I said before, I'm Josh. I work on open source tooling, so you should fund your open source dependencies, because we are all underpaid, and I would really appreciate your support and issues and pull requests filed and sent. So thanks, everyone. This is me. Cheers.